Yo, YouTube, GK back, and we are here to explain the final arc of the novella for Final Fantasy X. Yes, it is very confusing, and it has ended. Now, there are some important things here to remember. This is going to be an entire recap of the novella. We're going to go in depth on some ideas and concepts and characters here. But broad strokes, the novella takes place about 6 months-ish after the events of Final Fantasy X2's perfect ending. That is the true ending of the game, no matter what ending you may have got. Titus returns. Even if you didn't get the perfect ending, this novella can still place itself in the lore as canon, even if you didn't do that, because Titus comes back regardless. In the novella, there are certain sides. There's like a boy's side, a girl's side, and both of their sides. That is not really relevant to the overall story and what we're going to talk about right now. It's just how it's set up as a work of English, how it's written. But the thing you really need to pay attention to here is, number one, Zanarkand has mages and assassin mages. Okay, assassin mages are what mages are, except they carry out assassination missions. Zanarkand has annexed itself from Bavel. Bavel has summoners. So Bavel has always had summoners. Summoners function a lot differently 1,000 years ago and pre the Zanarkand War, right? All of our information about Spira has always been from the Zanarkand War, or the Machina War, a better title, forward. We've never really gotten information from the games of life preceding that war, and even here, that information is scarce. However, summoners who reach a certain power level can be considered gods of some sort. There are gods of this world, Spira, pre-Zanarkand War. There aren't really gods in our Spira that we know of in 10 and X2, but there were gods. In this novella, the soldiers of Bavel mention that everyone knows the gods are fake, but we still believe them, almost to entice the fact that it's just a means to control people. However, we do meet a god named Lucera. Lucera is a name that pops up frequently in Final Fantasy titles. Lucera is one of the gods or goddesses who makes contact with Yuna on Besaid. Besaid used to be a place where summoners could go. It was an annex, or not an annex, a territory of Bavel, right? And Zanarkand mages invaded Besaid, carrying bombs that, that basically look like blitzballs. Throughout the whole story, we hear many characters talk about these bombs and how they actually didn't look like bombs, and people were caught off guard by these bombs. The common misconception out there is that Titus, foolhardily went up to one of these bombs, and since nobody really read the novella like I did, I mean, some people did, but the people who talked about it and kind of trashed it, they obviously really didn't read it, and they didn't understand that Titus didn't go up and try to kick the bomb. He didn't do that. He went near the bomb thinking it was a ball, just like many other characters did, and it blew up, right? And he died. Yes, he got incapacitated. His head was gone. Very gory, very, real. I mean, yeah, his head didn't have to fly off, I guess, if you think that's silly. But I think it was to, show that this was a traumatic event. Titus is dead. He rolls in front of Yuna's feet, and, she freaks out from that. So I just wanted to clear that up, and why the bombs actually make perfect sense in the story, and whatever YouTube video you saw that made fun of the bombs, you can go over there and say, hey, I now I know you just didn't read it. You're just talking bad about it like everybody else did because it's the cool thing to do. When you deal with English and text, and mind you, this isn't made by some fan. This is, made by the director, and that director is an artist in every sense of the word. And I'm sure he can write a story, which he did, that makes sense. So let's get those things out the way. Set up the Bavel and set up Zanarkand. The other thing we need to quickly go over is bedalls. The owl bed. The precursors to the owl bed were the bedalls made by a guy named Alib. Yes, I said the word made because the bedalls are humanoid robot cyborgs that we find out actually have a soul, that they might actually be living, which blows everyone's mind. Bavel had changed the name to make it easier to say, the owl bed. They've done a lot of changing of names like that. And the changing of names is very congruent with how summoners who had reached that god tier, when they died, a new summoner who had that same level of power would reassume their role and take that name of that specific god. And I believe that those summoners who had died actually remain as unsent and move into a different realm of consciousness. Summoners are simply, and you need to change your idea of what a summoner is because Bavel did. A summoner is someone who simply is attuned way more carefully to the fireflies of the world. A summoner can beckon, another new word, beckon almost anything they want, given the fact that they have enough aeon cores. Aeon cores and the idea of praying to the faith are almost very similar. How you receive an aeon core, there is many ways, and yes, sex is one of them, because sex is to imply love and a strong bond. You can imagine that Unaleska and Zion had sex, right? That's not that hard to imagine. They were lovers. So they actually seeded that idea back in Final Fantasy X. It just didn't outright explicitly say they had sex to be able to create this aeon. But it was at that point, however, that Bavel had changed what an aeon is. They actually lessened the power of a summoner to only be able to call forth a specific aeon and interject power into that to fight. However, a summoner can make things like boats, can make things like islands, which we do see in this novella. A summoner is way more powerful than Bavel had wanted. And the important thing to note is that before the bedalls, summoners, which Bavel had, were the only way the world could make fire. Right? That's the example they used. Fire, as you can imagine, is the one thing that has spurred all of humanity almost, and it's very important. As soon as the bedalls were created, that turned Bavel upside down. Zanarkand had a hand in that. So Zanarkand realized that Bavel has been trying to hold power, been holding power, and Zanarkand wants to annex. Zanarkand has the bedalls, but so does Bavel, because at one point they were at least cordial with each other. And Bavel realized how the bedalls were really useful, number one, and now since they were created, life has forever been altered. There are 3 classifications of bedalls. You have the creator bedalls, you have the bedalls who have an affinity for magic, and then you have the worker bedalls. Now, Shinra says something very interesting. He says, I wonder why all we Albed know how to do is use the Machina and not remake the Machina or really even fix it at a great rate. It's because our Albed are descendants of the 3rd tier of Bedal, which happens to be the lowest tier. We learn that from a character named Bria in the novella. So the Bedal at least initially, were very much machine and organism. They're seen as having sparks of life, and it's funny, in the international version of Final Fantasy X2, we actually get a lot more of that. We actually see in the creature creator that the machines actually talk to each other and that they are alive, and Shinra even says that and notices it. It's not a coincidence that Shinra notices it, because he is part of that lineage. But the masses in North America at least did not get that point. Hence why the masses in North America really dislike the novella, because there's things that they don't understand because they just didn't take the time to do so. So that's very important, that a lot of these ideas have already been seeded, of course, in both of those games, and I think it's miraculous that a lot of it has gone unnoticed. So you can imagine that the Albed we know over time have become more and more synthetic, I guess, more and more akin to humans. However, we've never really seen Shinra's face, and this is me speculating here, because we're going to do a little bit of that as well. Shinra, I feel, has a face that is not exactly the same or normal like all other of his Albed kin and brethren. I feel like something is up with Shinra's face that will give him away as being part machine, maybe, or something of that effect. I am really intrigued in a Final Fantasy X3 what we might get. However, what I want in Final Fantasy X3, that video is coming, just not right now, because this is going to be strictly about the novella. Plus, I want to definitely finish up X2 some more. I'm definitely trying to do a platinum run, and I doubt I'm going to go back and do Final Fantasy X again, even though I probably should, given all the new information, but I severely doubt it. But back to this. So, now that the groundwork has been kind of laid, that now that you know what a summoner can do, what the Albed were purposed for, really just robots to work, which we have now, except we just don't put them in human skin, but we have robots making cars, so it's not out of the realm of possibility. And the two sides, Bavel and Xanarkand. Now for the actual story side, Titus comes back. Titus and Yuna want to spend time together. Titus and Yuna do spend time together. Everybody meets each other. This is broad strokes. Everybody meets each other. We meet people from 1,000 years ago. We learn that there are two realities or dimensions or streams of being and living coexisting on our timeline. So there's a flash of it on a boat where Kush, Ifano, and Vals, those are the three people you really need to pay attention to, and Bria as new characters. They kind of notice Titus, even though they don't really say that or explicitly come out and say that, but they notice him if you really read it. And they are going to Besaid. Besaid was a pivotal point. I have a video coming about the bunkers of Besaid. There's 2 bunkers on Besaid that hold significant importance. The idea of a pilgrimage and faith, those have changed. Yuna is the object of a lot of people's affection and attention. Summoners need to create cores to be powerful. And the only way to create cores, or some of the ways, is love, compassion, sex. You can actually kill somebody as well. If Final does something really inappropriate to get the woman he loves to be a core for him, he drugs her. It's assumed and presumed. However, it is very much implied and real that he does drug her with something, and does that right before an attack on that bunker in Besaid. And just to get it out there, I severely suggest that you all definitely read it. So remember that names often switch. Kush, who we don't really know who the true name is a female summoner who studied in Bavel. A lot of this, some of this recap I got from the wiki as well. Valm, or Velm, I think it's more like Valm, it's actually VA. His name's Briar, and he's Cush's guardian. And he doesn't like the Bedalls or the Bedors because they are machines, and that's kind of where that hate comes from. Bavel has a distaste for those Bedalls, so they are less than humans. So it's only natural that that hate for a Bedor, a Bedall, would have carried over to what they call the Al-Bed. Now that starts to make real sense why they actually hate them, because they're actually not humans, but they wanted rights that humans have, and Bavel was not having it. Ifanel, whose name is actually Jote, again, Johot or Joit, a god, right, is a male summoner who is very vain. Arb, who is misnomered right there, it's Alib, because even the wiki has some things wrong here, I've noticed since I've read the book. Alib, he's the maker of the Bedalls, we went over that. And Sloan. Sloan is a minor character in terms of the whole story, but he's the older brother of Arnie, and he aided Valm in fighting against the assassins and getting revenge for the death of his brother Arnie. But Sloan only really relevant in the first half. Titus meets Vidina, Waka and Lulu's child, and the world is changing very much so. The old, just like our world, the old and the new are always combating each other because the old are resistant to change, while the youth want things to change because they can see and realize a future that they want to live in. The old can't really do that. They'd rather everything remain the same. And it's actually really good that the youth always really win out, and the old, have to come to the realization that they're no longer relevant. It's sad to say, but it's a truth, because in order for progress to keep going, we can't have old people just holding all the youth back, even though the older ones are the ones in power. Progress is slow. It's kind of like the leader of Yevon's Barrelize saying, one thing at a time. Well, one thing at a time doesn't exactly satisfy the youth's insatiable need for advancement. So Yuna has been called in to basically guide the older people of the island, because information is coming a lot quicker. Those comm spheres we worked on with Shinra, yes, those have blown up, and those are all around the world. Bria, it's not Briar like the wiki says. Bria could feel that Titus actually comes from the Xanarkin of 1,000 years ago. But because Bria is an unsent, he has lived for over 1,000 years. The issue is Titus really from Xanarkin, or is he from the dream of Xanarkin? That's why it's so important to make that distinction, because if Titus dies, which he did, and Yuna beckons him back, calls him back, because now she has a new power. Lucera and Final, they passed a new power to her, a new summoning method to show her that she is more capable, and she actually brings Titus back. But who is she bringing back, right? If you recall a boat, and you know every detail of that boat will be like that for as long as you remember it that way. But if you don't know too much about a person, like Titus, then you can see how there might be complications with keeping him whole, or him staying in a physical form on the plane that you're in. Like I said, there are two different planes, and Yuna and Titus use water to basically transfer through the planes. However, Titus does this really cool running scene where he thinks about where he wants to go, he starts running, and then he pops into that place that he's at. I thought that was really cool in text form and imagining it. Yuna is stuck on some other side of the plane where it's a dilapidated place, a building, a bunker in the room, and there's an old creepy crystallized summoner there. basically like the faith, right? Crystallization and the faith is a thing. You can equate it to like Final Fantasy XII's Lassie, that kind of idea of crystallization. And breaking the dream basically breaks the summoner and lets them eternally rest. Now, people like Valm, Kush, and Bria and Vaus have been traveling 1,000 years. Like Bria has had to assume different names because he has lived so long. He loved one of the summoners a long time ago, but then eventually, had a wife and a daughter and loved them, but they died. And it's been it's like a quest for like revenge on whose fault the war was and which way it went and how everything shook down. Surprisingly, there is no mention of sin popping up at this war. So sin has yet to be rather explained in a real way. Because a lot of this is it's a little bit of before, but it's a lot of during the war, like certain battles between sides, ideas, but it's not exactly like, okay, this is how sin came into existence, or yes, this is how life was before the Machina War. There were, peace and technology boomed and mages and the summoners made the fire and everyone was, cool. There's not a lot of that information. These are just specifics onto the Zanarkand War, our characters, and them getting evolved into something else. Yuna has to decide whether she wants to tell Titus that what he is now, because he comes back and doesn't remember what happened with the bomb. The thing is, Titus also comes back after the events in FX2 and doesn't know what he did for 2 years. So Titus is not a stranger to losing time. So I think that also helps with him not needing to necessarily know what he is now currently. But you also play with the idea that, yes, everybody has to die eventually, but does a 22-year-old kid have to die? No. And it's not his time yet. But the crazy thing is Titus going to show signs of aging? Do unsent age? I'm not 100% sure that they do. Is he going to watch Yuna get older as he remains that same youthful vigor? I'm not too sure. It's an interesting concept to think about and kind of sad when you really boil it all down. Joy tells Bria how Kush loved him, which we kind of went over that. And Bria asks where Kush is, and Yuna replies, "You don't know." There's a mission that these gods come in and these old summoners come in. And they kind of give Yuna and Titus their own missions. Yuna's is kind of be better as a summoner and understand new rules for her craft, which could be amazing in Final Fantasy X3, just kind of summoning things. But Titus's order from Infernal is to kill her. Bria realizes the reason he's able to exist like this is because he was beckoned by Kush's feelings. But Titus has to find Kush, because that's the main love protagonist of their story and their triangles, just like Shuyin and Len were of X2. It's an interesting fact that Shuyin was intended to be Titus, however it just didn't fit with the lore at that time. So Shuyin and Lin are really just more ties to Vegnagon and the powers of Bavel that they had in store for Zanarkand at one point. There's a struggle in the village because Waka, Lulu, Riku, Pain, Brother's got a lot more text in this as well. He talks a lot more. They're all trying to figure out what caused this massive storm that blew out the communications basically almost all across Spira. And they don't know how to fix it, but Bria says he does. He's locked in a cell. They captured him, and then he gets out by kicking Shinra in the face. He's redeemed at the end because he often misguided character because the reasons that he thought were just as he remembered, and over time, memories get distorted. So we have that kind of going on. And then the big thing that basically leads us to the audio drama, which came out with Final Fantasy X2's international version, is that Shinra is told that he should watch over the far plane. Now, it is assumed here that the Albed, or just the Bedalls, watched over the far plane. So the far plane has existed far longer than we really speculated in our Spira. So it goes back to the Machini War, and it predates that as well. So this far plane, a literal place in which you could go to see the existence of the other side. Really, I think the far plane is just a beckoning by a very strong summoner, and it's just stayed there, and the Fireflies go there and can be there and rest there. I don't believe that in this world that the soul ever really leaves. Well, the soul can leave. The body, the ideas, the memories, they hold a lot more significance, and they're all collected in the far plane. That's why you can recall on those Fireflies to bring that image back. That's just a theory I have. So he says, to watch the far plane. Now we know from the audio drama, well, Sin has come back. But you had to have read this to really understand the weight of that, because beckoning and summoning is a lot different than Bavel made it be for the last 1,000 years. Even Unaleska, I have a really strong inclination that she was even fooled by the real extent of her powers. I know it's confusing because when you think of Bavel and think of Xanarkand, everything becomes hogposh. And I'm running a little late. I don't think I hit everything I want to hit. So if this video gets a little of attention, and you want a part 2, put it down in the comments, and we'll really go in depth on everything. This was basically our Arc 3 recap and a broad strokes, theories here and there, talking about some of the characters video. If we really want to go down the rabbit hole with a lot of this, we can. However, I think it apropos to move on to the audio drama. Get that down. Let's talk about that. Let's get the basic concepts there, and then we can really move on to maybe like a recap video for like all of the text or the audio drama and the novella, what it all means, and maybe stop it there and then make the video for what do we need in Final Fantasy X3, like what do we want to see, or we can do the part 2 to this video. I'm not sure yet. Go check out the Final Fantasy 15 Comrades lore through. It's a little different. It's intended for you to be able to put it on your background, maybe listen to some things while you're doing the like some of the hunts you might be doing or something. And I want to post that like every other day or something. I'm not 100% sure yet. So I hope you enjoyed the novella, the go through of that, and the recap videos. I'm trying to think, are there any other characters I made? No. Yeah. Well, besides the father of Unaleska, it's unclear as to whether that is the actual Archbishop of Xanarkand. We're thinking it is, and he was the one who decided to defect from Bavel. But again, we're not 100% sure. A war could spark, but a war could go on for 20 years. It could go on for 50 years. We don't exactly know that much about time, but we can make it a fair assumption that Unaleska's father was the one who actually defected from Bavel. But that's going to be all from me for today, in regards to Final Fantasy's novella. I'm GK. Have a good day, and I'll catch you later.